1 out of 10. In any scenario, this isn't a high ratio. If you're a student and you get 1 out of 10 in a test, it probably means you ought to study more. If you're a restaurant owner and you receive 1 out of 10 stars from a customer review, it probably means there's something wrong. Good evening, Toastmaster members and guests. My name is Ciara Murphy, and I promise I'll return to this statistic shortly. But let me begin by taking you on a journey into my past. When I was 11 years old, the Disney Pixar film Cars was released. I loved this movie, firstly because who doesn't love a movie about talking cars? And secondly, because it introduced me to the wonderful world of country music. You see, the soundtrack to this film included 3 country songs, 2 by Brad Paisley and 1 by Rascal Flatts. Whilst I didn't know who any of these artists were at the time, or indeed what country music was at all, hearing these songs opened me up to a genre of music that I haven't stopped listening to. Since Cars, I've seen almost every country artist in my music library live on tour, hosted my own country radio show, and started a country music blog, which I run to this day. But the more I've been drawn into this world of beautiful melodies and heartfelt lyrics, the more I've begun to realize that something is greatly lacking in the genre. This brings me back to my statistic of 1 out of 10. Out of the top 10 albums on the Billboard country music chart at the time of researching this speech, only 1 was released by a female artist. Out of the top 20, just 2. And out of the top 50, only 5. The other 45 were male. You don't really need to look any further than the charts to see that the representation of women in country music is severely lacking. But I discovered that it isn't just in album sales that we see this gender gap. Earlier this year, I attended CMC Rocks, the biggest country music festival in the Southern Hemisphere, and one where all of the headliners were male. Similarly, Europe's biggest country music festival, Country to Country, had only 4 female acts out of the 12 who played the main stage. And only 6 out of the 18 top billed acts at the biggest country music festival in the world this year, CMA Fest, were female. How is it that in this quote-unquote progressive world in which we live, we have a music genre where women are so underrepresented? It's not for lack of trying. Having spent many years interviewing artists in the genre, I can tell you that there's just as many women trying to make it as men, if not more. And it's certainly not because they're not as good as men. I can point you in the direction of 2 of my favorite artists, Kacey Musgraves and Maren Morris, to see for yourself. It also can't be argued that that's just the way the genre is. You look back at country music a few decades ago, and the likes of Dolly Parton, Reba McEntire, and Shania Twain ruled the charts. So what happened? My research pointed me to 2 main reasons which tend to go hand in hand: labels and radio stations. The reality is that labels just aren't signing as many female artists as they used to. The University of Southern California estimated that 16% of country artists and only 12% of country songwriters signed were female. Why so low? One possible reason is due to the current focus on touring. Labels are increasingly looking for artists who can sell out stadium tours and therefore make them a lot of money. Country website The Boot suggests that party anthems are better suited for touring, and so it's the usually male artists who produce these tracks that get support from the labels. Less women signed to labels obviously means less women played on radio, and this has created a vicious cycle in which labels claim it's too difficult to get female artists played on air, so they're not signing them, and radio stations state that the labels simply aren't giving them the artists to play. But is this lack of radio airplay a problem? Well, my research suggested that it doesn't necessarily correlate to a lack of success. Kacey Musgraves has long had her music shunned from country radio due to controversial lyrics and not quite fitting into the country box. And yet earlier this year, She won the coveted Album of the Year Grammy out of all genres. However, there's no denying that country radio is incredibly important for fans to discover new artists. And if male artists are the only ones who are signed and played on radio, they're the only artists that fans are given the opportunity to discover. As a result, their subsequent success will only spur labels and radio stations to sign and play more male artists. The more this happens, the more women's voices and their perspectives are erased from the genre. Beverly Keel, co-founder of Change the Conversation, calls this an embarrassment to country music and a disservice to the girls and women who listen to country radio because their stories are not being told there. And this has wider implications than just alienating female listeners who have less songs that they can connect with. When I was at school, I remember various conversations about the lack of girls wanting to major in science and technology at university because they weren't seeing women like them succeed in these fields. And I worry that the same can be said of country music. Country superstar Carrie Underwood posed the question, think of the little girls sitting at home saying, I want to be a country music singer. What do you tell them? If girls aren't seeing or hearing about women succeeding in their chosen fields, what makes them think they themselves could? By not supporting women, country music is ignoring artists who are necessary to the growth of the genre and the continued support of fans such as myself. Is there a solution? Well, yes. If labels signed more female artists, country radio would play them. And if country radio played them, more labels would sign them. It's simply a case of who will budge first. 1 out of 10 is not good enough, but lucky for us, country music's present doesn't have to be its future.